Leaders of some of the largest councils in England have appealed to the government for emergency financial support to prevent them becoming insolvent during the pandemic. The County Council's network says that without a £5 billion income guarantee, many non-essential services will have to be cut. There could also be an impact on care providers which rely on council funding. Here's our political correspondent Alex Forsyth and a warning that her report contains some flashing images.
Emergency food parcels for the vulnerable, prepared and packed by Staffordshire County Council.
I don't know how many thousands we've done.
Across the country, councils are providing a range of extra support, often adding pressure to budgets. For those on the receiving end, these are essential services. Like Chris, self-isolating for his health and grateful for the help.
I would have had to starve, literally, because I'd got nobody. Who can you call on to just magically appear with food?
For councils in Staffordshire, like elsewhere, the increased costs of this crisis are coupled with a drop in income. Parking charges often suspended, leisure centres and tourist attractions closed, and there's fear about a fall in business rates and council tax if people can't afford to pay. The County Council here welcomes extra government funding, but says it's still left a gap.
The cost to the County Council are probably about £50 million at the moment, and the government have given us £38 million. Our council finances will be stretched. They're manageable at the moment, and we've had additional costs that the government should fund.
So far, the government's given an extra £3.2 billion to councils in England, and last week a further £600 million for councils to pass on to care providers. But there's demand for more. At the start of this crisis, councils were told by the government to spend what it takes, but there's growing concern they will be left out of pocket. Many want the government to guarantee it will cover the costs of their lost income, because some fear they'll simply run out of money, and that could have a real impact on some crucial services. Take social care, already under strain, exacerbated by this pandemic. Private providers who rely on income from councils say, with budgets tight, the extra government money isn't getting through to them.
It was not nearly enough money. We've seen one home closure already. I think there will be others that are just teetering on the edge now. This is a result of underinvestment by successive governments for a period of nearly 2 decades.
The government says as well as extra funding in this crisis, councils have had more money overall to spend in the past year. A spokesman said they continue to work closely with councils as the pandemic progresses, and any council concerned about their future financial position should contact the Ministry for Local Government. Those running the services many rely on say they do need a short-term fix, but also a long-term funding solution. Alex Forsyth, BBC News.
The head of the UK's independent budget forecaster has said that the economy is likely to have a slower recovery rather than a bounce back to previous levels of activity. Robert Choate was speaking in a BBC interview, and our business correspondent Katy is here for more on this. What are the expectations about the likely shape of the recovery, Katy?
Well, the pandemic is hitting the UK's economy, and the Office for Budget Responsibility has warned it could shrink by a third in the second quarter. But the big unknown is what happens next, what the recovery will be like. The most optimistic prediction would be for the sharp drop to be followed by a swift bounce back, and the OBR has modelled that scenario. However, its chairman, Robert Choate, said today that he thought a slower recovery was more likely in practice, and the impact of that, including on the public finances, would depend on factors including how confident people were to actually get back to work and to spend money, which of course affects tax revenues. But he said the real worry was actually whether we'd see permanent scarring on the economy, so we'd see lots of businesses failing, for example, and people losing their jobs, not being able to get new ones. He also said there will be kind of long-term changes to the way the economy operates, more online shopping, sectors like restaurants ending up much smaller than they were before, but he said he did not necessarily see austerity as the way the government would respond to higher levels of debt.
Katy, thank you very much. This has been the first weekend of eased lockdown restrictions in England, with people permitted to drive to other locations for outdoor exercise. Some popular areas have asked visitors to think twice before making the journey, especially where social distancing is hard to achieve. Our correspondent Claire Marshall has been talking to some of those who headed for the seaside.
The chalk cliffs of the Dorset coast and its most cherished landmarks, Lulworth Cove and the limestone arch of Durdle Door. What a place to come after a lockdown. Around 2,500 people have made the trip here today. Way up on yesterday, and later in the week the weather's only going to get better. The owner, who's had to furlough 140 workers, says even before the lockdown was relaxed, people were trying to come here.
Of course, now they can come. The police don't have any power to stop them. If we hadn't opened, they'd be on the roads, walking around anyway.
They're doing what they can to keep people safe, but you can't get around geography. This perfectly shows the problems that lie ahead. Hundreds of thousands of people normally come to this beach, but this is the only route in and out. Look how hard it is to social distance. People are doing their best to stay away from each other. It's such a release after so many weeks cooped up.
They've handled it really well, you know, having the one-way system here, and there's obviously a lot of people here, the sun's shining, but yeah, I feel really safe and just happy to see families having fun.
Still, some are worried by what they see. The Peacock family drove an hour and a half to get here. We spoke to daughter Ellie and mum Jane.
It's nice to get out of quarantine, but I think it's going to peak again because of everyone's just going to go mad and go anywhere they can.
It's lovely to get out, but I'm quite shocked as to how many people are here and how they're not paying attention to the social distancing. I find that quite annoying, to be honest. It's like being in Tesco's.
In other parts of England, people were back on the beach in Southend in Essex. And up in the Peak District, car parks were full for the second day. Local authorities are still asking people to stay away. Also back in business, the coastal town of Bridlington, north of Hull. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, the lockdown rules haven't changed. But here in England, people are making the most of the relaxation. Claire Marshall, BBC News, Dorset.